Welcome to Blackbird episode number 68. My name is James, and today I am thrilled to bring back to the show Mr. Jacob Winograd. Jacob is, of course, the host of the Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy podcast, a former guest on this show, and I've been on his show a couple of times as well. So we just wanted to continue the conversation. It has gotten pretty good feedback from the audience, and the audience knows best. In this conversation, we're talking a little bit about politics, a little bit about religion, and we get really personal as well. So I think you're going to enjoy it. Remember, head over to blackbirdpodcast.com, sign up with your email address so that you never miss an episode. And if you are feeling generous, or if you just want to get these conversations a little bit early, sign up with a credit card number for $7 a month or $70 a year. You can get full access to all of my interviews, including the pre-show banter and other sort of unedited content that the normal plebs don't get on the free feed. So head once again to blackbirdpodcast.com, sign up with your email address and or a credit card to get all of those benefits. And with that, here is my conversation with Jacob Winograd. Jacob, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining me tonight on this lovely Wednesday.
It is Wednesday. Gosh, I can't keep track of time anymore, dude.
Isn't it nuts?
Every day? Yeah, every day blurs together. I just Saturday comes and it's just I think I need to get up and get ready for work. And Bria's just like, "What are you doing? Get back to bed."
You're a mechanic, right?
Yeah.
So do you work like normal Monday through Friday hours, or do you have to work weekends, or how does that work?
I work, supposed to work normal Monday through Friday hours, but on top of being a mechanic, I'm working in a family business. And of course, lately, because of the stuff going on in my family with my dad being in the hospital, I'm kind of having to put in some extra time, which sucks. Yeah. But
how's it going with your dad?
It's I don't want to get too carried away too soon, but it seems like he's going to pull through. The doctors give every bit of good news with the caveat of it looks like he's doing good, but also keep in mind with COVID, things can literally change in a day. So it's cautiously optimistic is the phrase I'm using right now. Seems like he's starting to pull through, requiring less of the ventilator. And they're taking him slowly off because they had him heavily sedated. They had him on paralytics and stuff, so that the ventilator could do all the work to help his lungs heal. And he seems to be needing less of that now, and so might be waking up soon, maybe in the next week. He's already kind of he's in a phase, right? A fog right now, where he's starting to open his eyes, and he'll track his eyes will track around the room. And he'll kind of respond, someone comes into the room, his eyes will open, but he's not fully awake either. That's the way, at least that's what they're describing to me. I can't be there because of bullshit reasons. So, everything that I know, I'm told second or third hand, because sometimes I'm not even on the phone call. I'm just getting information that's repeated to me by my stepmom, who's, not always the best filter.
Damn, why can't you be there? Is it vaccine related, I assume?
It's just their policy that anyone that's got a COVID case who's in critical condition can't have any visitors.
Oh, geez.
Yep. So the hospital has a one visitor per room policy with anything non-COVID related. But if it's COVID related, it's very strict until they're if they're in long-term recovery ward after COVID, then they'll allow visitation, but not before that.
I wonder how common that is. Is that like a nationwide thing, or is that just happening in your neck of Pennsylvania?
I would imagine it's fairly common.
Wow.
Yeah. That's, I don't know if you listen to it, and if you haven't, that's fine. I know you've been traveling and stuff, but I definitely bitched a lot about this in my latest episode. not
good.
not happy.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I very eloquently put it that keeping loved ones away when someone is sick is fucking evil.
Yeah, it really is. I'm sorry this happened.
That's my thesis.
It's a good thesis. You should nail that to a hospital door or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I should.
You're fucking evil.
And just repeat it 96 times? 99 times,
99. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, happy news. You got to officiate Michael Heiss's wedding, right?
Yeah, that was a blast.
How'd that? Tell me about it. First of all, this was on the same weekend as Tom Wood's 2000th episode.
Yep.
So like the Liberty community was kind of, torn between, should we go to the Fearless Leaders big event or the Fearless Leaders big event?
Yeah, I know. And apparently Mike and Tom had been, I guess, going back and forth trying to not have both of these events on the same day, but neither one could really avoid it. Because, the Mises Caucus had like that bash in Virginia the first week of October, which was complicating things too. Like there weren't that many weekends for them to choose from. Mm-hmm. But the wedding was a blast. There was a lot of it did kind of, my wife was almost like complaining. She was like, I thought we were going to a wedding, not a libertarian convention, because that's what it felt like. And what's funny is literally during the wedding, there was an Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania board meeting. And I'm on the board. Geez. So I had to keep running away from like the reception to go and vote.
One good thing, I'm on the LP of Minnesota's board, and I missed our meeting on Monday because we were in Universal Studios, Florida, and I still got elected to the Platform and Bylaws Committee. That's what happens when you don't have a contentious board. I'm very happy where I'm at in Minnesota.
Yeah, maybe it's almost like
Pennsylvania.
Your punishment for not showing up to meetings is that they give you more shit to do.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. I like the PBC though. I feel like I'm not real big on door knocking and collecting signatures and stuff like that. That's just not really my thing. But yeah, man, if I get to tell people what to do and how to think, that's right up my alley. What was the wedding like? Was it like a Christian wedding or more secular? I don't know.
It was more Christian. I mean, Mike and Emily are not as devout as I am. But they, Mike's a big fan of like Jordan Peterson, and so his religious views are kind of like similar to that. Kind of takes more of a Jungian archetypical approach to religion. But he wanted the ceremony to be, kind of like religious, but not too traditional. So he kind of like, and him and I have talked a lot about this stuff and are both big Jordan Peterson fans. So he kind of trusted me to kind of like find that right balance, which I think I did a good job. I mean, it was pretty religious. There was a lot of scripture throughout it. But I tried to, his one rule, which I actually appreciated, was that I couldn't use 1 Corinthians 13 because that's like that's the cliche passage that gets used in every freaking wedding. And I was like, no, I'm glad, because I actually hate when that passage is used, because that passage is not about romantic like love between a husband and wife. It's I mean, it's not bad. I'm not saying it can't be used, but it's just the fact that passage is used so much is, I don't know, just to me as a theological nerd, it can be kind of annoying. I'm that guy in the crowd going, well, actually, guys, that's not what that passage is about. But okay, you can use it that way.
I DJ'd a buddy's wedding a few years ago, and his wife, who's a cellist, would not allow Pachelbel's canon to be played during the ceremony. First, because it's cliche, but also because it's got a really boring cello part. And she just hates the song because all it is just like, I guess, strumming the bow, like, over and over and over again on the same note. So I guess, keep the cliches out of weddings is probably the moral of the story, the thesis. Why don't we nail that to every church? Keep cliches out of weddings.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was the first time I'd ever officiated one, but my dad had officiated a bunch. So it was also kind of it was really surreal doing it because, like, on one hand, I felt honored that Mike had asked me to do it. And already, like, months in advance, I had been kind of preparing for it. But then, like, with my dad in the hospital and not knowing if he was going to live or not, even throughout that weekend, it was kind of like I was doing it as kind of like a homage to my dad. You know what I
Sure,
mean?
yeah.
Like, so it was very, even though it wasn't my big day, it was Mike and Emily's big day. It was still very emotional for me as well.
That's awesome. Did you like go to seminary, or did you do the online ordination thing?
So technically, although I do have an online ordination that I got just in case they would change their mind, they literally just had the ceremony and are married in like their eyes and like in the eyes of God. They did not submit paperwork to the state because, like, I mean, and I'm like, hey, more power to you. You know what I mean? Like, if I was getting married now, I would honestly consider not giving the state that, like, because you know what I mean? It's kind of like, why do we need the state to tell us we're married? So that's kind of their attitude. And if they ever change their mind, it's one easy trip to the courthouse to rectify. But, you know, they cared more about having a ceremony that, you know, mattered on a personal and spiritual level than, you know, dotting all the I's and crossing the T's for the government.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, more power to him then. And congrats to Mike. And what's his wife's name? I don't even know.
Emily.
Yep. Well, and congrats to you too for officiating your first wedding. I got ordained from, you know, one of the online kind of ordination mills a few years ago, and I still haven't gotten to officiate a wedding. I think I would like to. I actually, I went to this life coach training thing, and I was going to be like the gay life coach. And, you know, this was right around the time when gay marriage was becoming a thing. And so I think here in Minnesota, I think we passed it, like the legislature passed it before the Supreme Court ruled on it or whatever. So I was going to be like the premarital gay life or like relationship coach, and then also the wedding officiant.
So would your TV show be Queer Eye for the engaged guy or something like that?
Oh my God. I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't even think that far ahead. What did we? Oh yeah. Well, so I got to go to the Tom Woods event this weekend, and
I heard that was a blast.
Yeah, it was really fun. There was
I saw you had dinner with Tom Woods as well as some other cool people. So I was definitely jelly.
It was me, and then the magician Doc Dixon, and then Adam. I think it's Hagen, maybe Fagan, and his wife Jennifer. And Adam was on episode like 947 of the Tom Woods show. So he's a professional gambler, or actually if you introduce him as a professional gambler, he corrects you. He says he's not a professional anything, but he makes money gambling, and was on the Tom Woods show talking about, you know, the sort of poker culture, I guess. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. Doc did some tricks at the dinner table, like real close up stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I guess Tom's fiance Jenna was the one who told him to invite me because they had an open slot. It was really kind of surreal.
Awesome.
I got to meet all the Tower Gang guys. That was a lot of fun. Hung out with Nick for a while. And then I think Toad was actually the first person that I saw. He and Reed came into the bar while Andrew, my partner, and I I think we were probably already pretty drunk by then, but yeah, the entire weekend there was just heavy drinking and laughter and hugs, and yeah, it was just fun. It was great. It really was. Unlike your wife, my partner knew exactly what to expect. So when he showed up at the Libertarian convention, he was like, "All right." But that's the thing about him, is he loves to be the life of the party. So it doesn't really matter, like, you know, why everyone's gathered. As long as he can make people laugh, he's happy. And judging by my DMs on Twitter, I think he succeeded. Everybody was talking about how hilarious he was. So that was good.
Is your partner libertarian, or is he not really? Okay.
He's not political at all. And if he were political, he would be like centrist probably. He's got some definite qualms with libertarian philosophy.
Gotcha.
But you know, we managed to make it work anyway, I guess.
Well, kudos to you. I can't. I'm way too of a opinionated asshole to be a partner with someone who didn't share my political beliefs. So I'm really happy. Like, and what's funny is that my wife's never been super into politics, but like when I became an anarchist and libertarian, it kind of like she became more interested when I did, because she was like, before I'd been involved like with, you know, Bernie Sanders or the Democratic Party, and then was flirting with like the Republican Party when I was starting to leave the left, but didn't really like it, and she thought all that was a waste of time. But yeah, I don't know. It's like when I became an anarchist, she was just like, well, yeah, that's basically what I've always thought. She was like, thanks for catching up
great.
to me finally.
All right. So I just got the very first hiccup. I had Chipotle for dinner and I jazzed it up with some extra spicy hot sauce. So if I start hiccuping into the microphone, either it's going to be there for all you listeners, or my editor is going to take them out somehow without charging me $1,000 for the episode. So I apologize if there's hiccups happening. Oh God, what was I going to say? So the Tom Woods thing, the partners thing, your wife, who sounds great. Oh yeah. So where are you at right now with LP and post-libertarianism and things like that? I feel like I change my mind on it every few days. Are you the same way? Or are you pretty firm in your like Mises Cockian convictions?
Yeah, I don't, it's so one thing that I really don't change on is that I feel like anything involving the GOP is at the very least not for me. Mm-hmm. Even maybe on my nicest day, I might be able to acknowledge, okay, maybe for some people in some states and some counties, it might make more sense for them to work within the GOP than within the Mises Caucus and the LP. Mm-hmm. I tend to generally lean towards that. I think that those instances are few and far between, and that generally it's kind of a time preference thing, and that the GOP is a much higher time preference strategy, but with no long-term vision, because I don't think you can build... Like, the reason I'm in the Mises Caucus is not even so much for the political activism, but for the culture. And I think the Mises Caucus is effective at creating a culture within the LP that is sort of the natural... what's the word? Descendant or a successor to the Ron Paul movement, basically. So, and that's what I think is the most effective is libertarian populism, basically, kind of like what Dave Smith says. I think that's better done in the LP than in the GOP. Obviously, if you're just looking at, well, I just want to do local politics, decentralization, nullification stuff, like, yeah, technically you can do it within the GOP. I can't really rebut that, but I just feel like, on average, I feel like the post-libertarians overestimate the power. Like the argument like Matt makes a lot is, if you're going to get involved in politics, at least get involved in politics with a party that has power. Right. And I don't know, that argument doesn't really resonate with me, because to me, the GOP has power in Washington. Local politics don't really operate the same way that national politics do. Mm-hmm. A lot of your GOP and Democratic county affiliates are really nothing but mouthpieces for their national counterparts, and they do nothing except once every 4 years they'll distribute yard signs and pamphlets and help people with voter registration for the presidential elections. And that's basically, again, on average across the board. I understand that, it seems to me like the two biggest exceptions that exist are New Hampshire and Florida. Mm-hmm. People like to bring those up. And it's like, okay, exceptions might exist, but not every state, not every county is New Hampshire and Florida. So I do find myself, to talk about where we do agree, I do find myself often in agreement with post-libertarians or praxians or whatever they want to call themselves, when it comes to a lot of the cultural stuff. And I definitely, although I've always been somebody, like, I come from the left, so I've always kind of felt like we shouldn't, turn away from the left and act like they're completely unreachable. At least right now, I've started to think that at least, I get, like, let me rephrase it this way. I think that although left and right both have their issues, and there's pros and cons when you're trying to reach either, there's also political and current events and present day context that has to be taken into consideration. So who is, like, the idea that through all time and all, every decade, the left and the right are going to be equally reachable, to me is kind of silly. There are going to be periods of time where it makes more sense to focus on trying to reach people who are more left of center, and then periods of time where it's going to make more sense to reach out to people right of center. And although I feel like during the Trump years and even before that, I had more success because, and this, I'm probably biased because I came from the left, but I felt like it was easier for me to talk to left wingers than right wingers and push them towards libertarianism. Lately, especially since 2020 and the COVID regime, I've had to come, and especially with a lot of the woke crap that's really like taken a hold on the left. I've kind of started to agree with guys like Pete Quinones and a lot of the Praxians as far as like in the here and now, I have a lot more in common with your average MAGA hat wearer than your average left winger. Now I'm still very much annoyed by your average MAGA hat wearer, and but I'm trying to learn to have more empathy and to recognize that, you know, like everyone has to come from somewhere. And I'm not going to, you know, it's kind of like taking a more Christ-like attitude in terms of like, you know, it's not, I'm not going to help these people learn if I shit on them and dunk on them. As much fun as it is, and even from a, you know, from a pure principled standpoint, sometimes it seems like they deserve to be dunked on. But you know, we're going to learn to separate people's beliefs from the person themselves. And so that's kind of, I guess, where I'm at as far as, you know, like in a cultural sense, I find myself sympathizing with the post-libertarians a lot. But when it comes to political strategy, I'm still way more a Meacock guy.
What about, so I guess my one pushback would be that why do you feel like you need to be part of a political movement?
Well, you know, I don't feel like you need to.
No, you, not you as
yeah.
in like
so in a general,
the general you, but the you as in Jacob Winograd.
I just feel like that's where I'm best suited for my gifts. I'm good at public speaking. I'm good at working in groups, working towards ends. I have a history in speech and debate, and I did parliamentarian debate. I'm good at, I don't know, I feel like I'm well suited to play within the political system and to reach people using that mechanism. I'm a big fan of agorism, but I've struggled to find ways to, I've struggled to find ways to just effectively use agorism in my own life to increase my own liberty. And it's hard for me to imagine how I could use agorism to just, like, if that's all I was doing, to reach more people. Some people do that, you know, and if I felt like it was possible for me to do that, I would, but I just know that I think I'm able to reach a larger audience working within the political arena, at least right now. I mean, it's not something that I think necessarily is something I will do forever. I'm also really invested in wanting the LP to be libertarian and actually advocate libertarianism. So part of this is like, I'm definitely in it at least until like the takeover happens. Post takeover, I might have to like do a reevaluation and come up with the exact amount of engagement I want to have. But I feel like just for the general good of society, we need a libertarian party that's at least libertarian. Even if I'm wrong on the strategy stuff, it's still, I don't think you can make an argument that it's better to have a libertarian party that's a joke as far as advocating and representing the philosophy than it would be to have a libertarian party that at least got that right. Even if they were very unsuccessful from a political standpoint, at least if the message is on point, I think that my ideal libertarian party is not so much a political heavyweight so much as it is a lighthouse or a beacon that attracts people to it, and then from there you kind of network out. I mean, like, I know I trigger people like our good friend Jose when I say, you know, like, I like kind of like using agorism and politics, but like, to me it's like a lot of people wouldn't have known what agorism was if they hadn't first like found libertarianism through oftentimes political means, like Ron Paul or the Mises Caucus in my case. So it's like, if I can do agorism in my own life and then use the Mises Caucus as a megaphone to like advocate how I think people should live their life and increase their own personal, like a lot of the stuff that post-libertarians talk about, I agree with. Like, yeah, do what you can to increase your own personal liberty and the personal and the liberties of like your local county and your family and stuff like that. I think localism is definitely the key. But we need an effective messaging device to like popularize that message and get more people to do that in their own communities. And I'm just not convinced the GOP is that effective megaphone.
Yeah, well, and especially in certain areas. I mean, if you're running as a Republican,
it's probably different area by area.
Yeah, if you're running as a Republican in Minneapolis, then you're going to get probably fewer votes than a Libertarian. I mean, I don't know for sure.
Well, and I know even
we don't have Republicans on our mayor ballot. Like, I mean, it's just not a thing. True. Really.
I know Andrew from Popular Liberty has kind of agreed with what I've said, where he says like his strategy is more for red, like pure red states or red counties. If you're a blue state or county or a purple, I think he's even said that like the GOP route might not be as, like the Mises Caucus strategy might make more sense in those areas. So I can, I personally, think we have to be humble when it comes to strategy. And so really, I have no beef with post-libs and Praxians. If they can, like be good teammates, then we can be good teammates, you know what I mean? And work from different spheres. I think when they were first figuring out what they were, they spent a lot of time like, maybe it wasn't meant in bad faith, but it came across a little bit like that. But their criticisms were like a lot of their talks were just heavily criticizing the Mises Caucus and attacking them. And it's just like, but I aired all this out with Pete on my podcast. And I was like, listen, if you guys aren't convinced you want to do the Meatcock route anymore, like go do your own thing and let's work together where we can work together. But like, I don't want to waste a lot of time shitting on you guys or having to like defend ourselves when you guys are shitting on us. Let's just, agree to disagree on that stuff and work together where we can. I mean, the Mises Caucus, one of our things in our platform is issue coalitions. And if we can have key, like to me, there's actually a strategy here where like, if we know in a certain state or county that there are key, Mises or Rothbardian, libertarians in GOP affiliates, like that makes it easier to build those bridges because we already have a contact on the inside. So, you know what I mean? I don't think it's a bad thing what they're doing. Just have some personal disagreements with, I guess, how they market what they're doing and their long-term vision.
That makes sense. Do you think that whatever is coming is inevitable and trying to stop it through electoral politics or even advocacy is even worth the time waste?
I think it is on the local level, but I do think that what's coming on the national level or even the global stage is sort of inevitable. But I think that's why localism is so important because, I mean, because I think the status quo cannot continue. I do not know if we are heading towards collapse or globalization. Those are the two big options on the table for me. Like either the regime is going to collapse or the power has to keep centralizing. And you can't get much more centralized than what we are unless we start, we have, I don't know, like an American Union or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I know that stuff's not really on the table right now, but it's just either something like that or some big military show of force I've also thought is possible. Because to me, it's like war is the health of the state. And if people are kind of like doubting your legitimacy because of your fiscal policy and how worthless the dollar is, but you want to maintain that like monopoly on the world stage and keep borrowing and printing money without dealing with the consequences, well, start a couple wars and, you can, keep putting that off. So I don't know. It's like, I'm probably like, I'm not anti-collapsitarian, but sometimes I think collapsitarians or people who think a collapse is coming underestimate the state's ability to, continually kick the can down the road. I mean, Rome put it off for a very long time. So America's still very young. I mean, it's 270 or 80 years old. So the idea that it would collapse in the next decade or two is, to me, like, I understand where they're coming from, but I don't know. Like, we could last another 200-300 years. It's hard for me to say. But whatever happens, what you have the most impact on is your local community. And while local politics isn't the only avenue to affect your local community, it is one tool. And I don't know, I'm a mechanic. I like to have every tool in my toolbox. When the tool truck people show up at the shop, I go out there and I buy tools, even if it's like, oh, this is to work on something I never worked on before. It's like, yeah, but I want it because Lord knows, like, if I don't buy it next week, a car like that will come in and I'll need that tool and you won't have it on your truck anymore. So I'm always somebody that likes to have every tool at his disposal.
How does localism in practice combat either the collapse or globalism? Which, I mean, globalization, like hyper-centralization, might be the result of a collapse. I mean, if the dollar crashes, there's not really another reserve currency. I mean, China is not in good shape. It's not like the yuan could take over as the world reserve currency. The UN or somebody
would have to. It's going to be Bitcoin, James. Venezuela's already adopted Bitcoin.
Well, if Venezuela's doing it. No. So I guess my question is, what is the practicality behind focusing on local politics and culture?
Well, at the very least, it's damage control. If there's going to be a collapse or a huge surge of power, or both, like you say, is possible, the more people who are libertarian leading in your area, the more you've built up those counter economics in your area, the more you're self-sufficient and the people around you are more self-sufficient. Just the better prepared you and your family and your community are, just the better off you'll be in any of those scenarios. Doesn't mean perfect, just means like you'll at least stand the best chance of taking whatever hits come from what happens and being able to rebound. I don't know that there's a path where local politics can prevent anything. I mean, I think that's a little idealistic at this point that we could, have a perfect national divorce that starts with states seceding and then counties seceding. I know that's kind of like the ideal model, but it just seems to me to be a little bit unrealistic that would happen all kind of like, or kind of like perfectly play out that way. I'd love it to. I'm pro peace and I hate war. I'd love for there to be a way to, de-escalate the rising tyranny without violence, but it does seem less likely as the months and the years pass. So, but if there is going to be violence, then that's why localism matters too, because what matters most is being able to protect like your immediate like surrounding area. But I feel like you have to build those coalitions with other counties too. And that's why I'm still in with the Mises Caucus too, is because it's like, here in PA, we have a really strong network of MECOCs across every county almost. So like if shit hit the fan tomorrow, I'm not saying I'm ready, but I know I got hundreds of people in my surrounding, like my county and my surrounding counties. Even I'm close to Maryland, even the people that are down in Maryland, it's like, I know a lot of people and I know that we could easily semi-easily come together and find a way to, I don't know, like respond to whatever's happening. You know what I mean? So, and I love our little like, every, we have like the National Mises Caucus Discord, then like each state typically will have its own Discord chats and stuff. I know here in PA, we've a lot of people talking about agorism and cryptocurrency and, trading ideas on like chats about growing their own food, chats about, doomsday prepping and all that. Like, so that's the culture we've built. So you're never going to be perfectly ready, but I feel like we've built a culture that is as ready as you can be for whatever happens. And so that's why I think that's where I think the local involvement in politics is important.
I think the whole kind of the main reason really, there's a few main reasons, but one of the reasons that I kind of no longer identify as an agorist is because the intensity and like just you mentioned doomsday prepping, and I find doomsday prepping kind of ridiculous, to be honest. The paranoia and intensity with which agorists go about their interactions and things like that really kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't like intensity anyway. I'm just really laid back, just kind of by nature. So I guess that's part of the reason that I still kind of stick around the LP, because, like you said, you can kind of have all of those different flavors without necessarily having, the fundamentalist mentality that you get in agorist circles a lot, or, in other circles. I mean, Jason Stapleton, I'm if I lean a direction in all of these fights, Jason Stapleton is the one that I lean in, that wealth, power, and influence thing, without the political ideology behind it really at all. But even there, I mean, Jason has no problem telling Dave Smith that, yeah, sure, run for president to build your brand, but don't run for president to run for president. And he also warns that running for president might be a destructive thing. That's something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about, and I'm not really ready to talk about it too much right now, but I'm a little bit worried about political routes, just because I watch the progressives, and that's the Democrats and the Republicans, like all of the Democrats and the Republicans who still consider themselves sort of junior partners in the ruling class, I guess. They have this way of kind of using judo. Like, even if they're out of power, even on paper, even if they've lost their elections and they're no longer in political power, they are able to use their cultural power to demonize the people who do have political power. And that worries me, because, if you get somebody smart in there who's not Donald Trump, then the backlash against that, it only takes a spark. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that I worry a little bit about with Dave, and the Mises Caucus, because the Mises Caucus guys, hell, I've always thought, and I might have said this on your show, I don't remember. I've always thought that libertarians were smart, like, just because the libertarians that I hang out with are smart. But having hung out in libertarian party circles for the last year or so, it's really just the Mises Caucus who have brains. And there's exceptions to that, obviously, but
yeah, there's a lot of regime libertarians who are not really well read. Philosophical libertarians. We're the third option. We're not left
fight
or
the
right.
duopoly.
But trust me, I know a lot. Yeah, deal with a lot of that. So I definitely feel that. But was there anything? I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have anything else to that?
No. I think I was just kind of ranting. Really.
I mean, it's so there's definitely a risk of Mises Caucus takes over the LP. Dave Smith runs a campaign. I guess you're worried about like what kind of demonization can they do of Dave and people in the Mises Caucus and the LP that hurts our brand. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's kind of like we're already like down 100 points in the seventh inning. So it's like, I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? We'll be losing by 110 points in the seventh inning. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like we're not in a close race. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, what I've been upset about, like the LP strategy for the longest time has been awful, because they play the game like they are in a close race when they're not. And it's just moronic. I mean, it's like they're down. Like the analogy I used on I used this when I was on an Adam Nutter show. I was like, it's kind of like when you're or no, was Adam Nutter or Josh? Maybe it was both. Maybe use this analogy on both of their shows. But it's like if you're, I don't know how much football analogies, but it's just like if you're down, 2 scores in the fourth quarter, and on third and 6 you run a ISO run play up the middle. It's just like, that's a play that you run when you're either like in a close game or if you have the lead and you're trying to preserve it. We can't play politics like the duopoly does, because like we don't have that kind of power, and really we don't want that kind of power. So I like the way that Karen Ann put it on my podcast, where it's like, to me, I want the LP to be an anti-political party. An analogy I've been using lately is that I I don't even like to say what we do is engage in politics. I you know how they're like, agorism is counter economics. I think there is something that I've tried to start conceptualizing, and the best term I have for it is counter politics.
Sure.
It's not like, because you're not playing to win power. You're playing to expose those who have power. It's kind of like in like one of my favorite movies ever is The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as the Joker.
Mhm.
And like the Joker was not really playing a game that was to win. He played a game to like expose how deep the corruption was. And obviously I'm not like advocating for like Joker's exact means of, like using violence to do that. But like, I don't know, just that kind of like engaging in the game, not to like, that's something that, one of the criticisms that people like Matt and others in the post lib group will make towards us in the Mises caucus is like, well, you're not playing the game the right way. And it's like, well, you're right, we're not. That's intentional. Like, it's a dumb, evil game. Like, we're not playing it to win, because if we were, we wouldn't be who we are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're playing the game. Like we're playing their game as like a meta game. It's like you're playing the game in a way that is serving a deeper purpose. And so, again, and it's just one tool. And if you're not, if every individual has to decide for themselves what their best use of time is. Some people are not meant or built for politics. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, you need to recognize that and find different ways. Like if you care about liberty and you want to advocate for liberty in your own life, or even just like, or you want to see more liberty in the world of the people around you, you want to resist the tyranny of the state. There's many different ways you can do that. And you don't even have to just pick one. But I also would advise against picking too many, because there's a danger there. There's a danger in hyper-focusing on just one path. And then, then there's also a danger in like, I don't know, like it's like when you're a kid and you go to the fountain soda machine and you just like put one of each soda in in your cup. It's like, okay, that might taste rancid by the time you're done. But yeah, pick 1 to 3, pick 2 to 3 things that you're good at, that you think you can contribute well to the movement. And it's just, we have to remember that like there are no, like we don't know what the right answers are, and there really is no one right answer. Just like the marketplace is diverse and takes a division of labor to produce things, and the things that get produced change over time, and we've seen innovations in our lifetimes that no one ever could have dreamed of. Like libertarian activism is economics, just like everything else that is human action is economics, and it's subject to the same rules and the same market forces. So we can't centrally plan a route that's going to get us to liberty. We just have to do what we have to, in the praxeological sense, just do what we as individuals feel compelled to do, and we'll all serve our own like small but equally important part in the marketplace of trying to create liberty. And so that's really my message to everyone, is just like, we don't all have to do the same thing. And it's actually better that we don't all do the same thing, because like, I mean, think of the pencil analogy. What if everybody said the most important part of making a pencil is the wood? So we all got into the lumber industry. It's like, well, great. We have a whole shit ton of wood, but we don't have any erasers, we don't have any metal, and we don't have any graphite. So now what? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I don't know if this is the same for you, but when I was a kid, that mixture of all the different soda flavors was called a suicide, which your analogy makes that a little bit more prescient, I guess. Prescient's probably not the right word, whatever the word is. I should note that I have been on planes and stuff and just not sleeping for the last several days. So I'm a little bit off my game, but it's all right. I think we're having a pretty good conversation anyway. Why don't we switch gears? What's going on with your faith? How are you doing spiritually with all the shit that's going
on? It didn't take me too long to get to a good place. I mean, when he first went in, I wasn't too worried, and then he started to get worse. And then when he got really bad, It was tough. It's really, again, I'm like repeating myself, but it's really fucking tough not being able to see him, not being able to visit him.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like I didn't leave things off in a bad place with my dad, but it's just like, it's too soon. I mean, so there was a lot of like first week or so, I was just really struggling personally. Like, I'm not ready to lose my dad. There's too much unfinished. I'm not going to be able to, move on without having that closure. So I was really angry and upset for about a week, especially as he got worse. But I've been through this before, kind of, unfortunately, not with my dad so much, but with my daughter. I almost lost her when she was like 1.5. And that was awful, actually. So she was, like, long story short, she was in the hospital. She was having seizures, and she was so young that the seizures were so intense and long enough that they were causing her oxygen levels to drop really bad. And every time she had one, they would struggle to keep her oxygen levels up. But then they gave her some anti-seizure medication, and now I didn't know this at the time, but we came to find out that they gave her the wrong medication, which played a role into why things got worse. But we thought that, okay, she's on anti-seizure medication. She's not going to have a seizure for at least a while they're running tests. So I ran home to get stuff. Just because I was like, okay, we're going to be in here for at least a few days, if not what ended up being actually was a few weeks. Actually, we transferred from York Hospital down to Johns Hopkins because things got so bad. York Hospital said, you got to go. We can't keep her. The literal words were, we cannot keep your daughter alive. So we had to take an ambulance ride down to Johns Hopkins. But so I went down to our house, which was like 20 minutes away from the hospital. And of course, at the same time that I went down there, an accident happened on like the interstate going northbound. So I knew that. Like I was like going down and I saw that the road, like all the cars were in a standstill. And I was like, I'll take the back way back to the hospital, which is like an extra 10 minutes. Well, I'm like packing up stuff, getting clothes, phone chargers, stuff like that. And I was already getting ready to leave. And then my sister calls because my sister had come to the hospital to help us. And she said, Jacob, you got to get back here. She's like, we were all in the room. She had another seizure. Her O2 started to get really low. They rushed all of us out. They called a code because her heart stopped. We don't know what's going on. And I mean, at the time, like, I'm just like, daughter, okay, her O2 went down and they called a code because her heart stopped. That's all they knew. So I had no idea if my daughter was even alive at that point. And I had to drive, back way. I couldn't take the highway. I was going like 75 miles an hour down roads that were like, 35 mile per hour speed limits. Like get impatient at every light. And just, that was the longest 30-minute drive of my life. And that was like the first time I really had like one of those, like, my faith was coming into like, it was a head-on collision with reality. Like my faith had never been tested like that before. And I was just angry and bitter, but I don't know, something in me just knew from everything that I've read and everything I'd experienced that, I was like, I just started to think, like, who am I to make my suffering special? I was like, if my daughter dies today, I had 1.5 years with her, which some people don't even get that. Some people's children die at birth. Some people's children die in more horrific ways than my daughter has. Like life is already like that. That's like, I already knew this. Life is filled with suffering and horrible things and evil things happen. It's like, so if I'm going to lose my faith now just because it became personal, then I never really had it. So I just kind of calmed down, slowed my car down, and just started praying. And what I said was, God, I'm not ready to let my daughter go, but if you have determined that this is the time that she is to come home to you, I will not stop loving you, and I will still worship you all the same. And then as I pulled into the hospital, I got a text from my sister saying that she was stable and that she was okay. So yeah, that's what I had to go, I had to go through that again these past 3 weeks now, actually, almost, because he got on the ventilator. Tomorrow it'll be 3 weeks from when he went in and got on the ventilator. It's a little different. There's a different relationship that you have with a daughter than you have with your father. But yeah, I mean, I can't say that my faith hasn't been challenged, but I guess it was like, I just knew, like, I was better prepared this time on that front. Faith is a very stubborn, at least in my experience, faith is a very stubborn thing. It's like this, I don't know. This is the only analogy that's coming to my head, which is probably a weird one, but it's kind of like a bee sting. It's like, you know what I mean? If you get stung, you can try to ignore it all you want, but there's just something in the back of your head that still knows, like, this fucking hurts. Like, I got stung. And that's what my faith has been throughout my life. Even when I've tried to run away from it, it's like this, it's weird. I'm describing my faith as something painful, but there is something, I don't know. I think there's something Christian about that. Like, Jesus kind of says, he's kind of contradictory sometimes, at least like to our understanding. Jesus says, like, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And then he also says, like, if you are persecuted, give thanks, because those who follow me will be persecuted. So it's a little weird how both those things are kind of true at the same time. But yeah, it's been tough, but I don't think my faith has wavered, because I think I've come to understand that my faith is part of who I am. And even if the most, like, I've since that, what happened with my daughter, I've tried to just be ready to realize, especially as I became a libertarian, and like, I wasn't a libertarian when the stuff happened with my daughter. Like, I think I'd started to become a libertarian, but I wasn't like where I am today. And like, as I became a libertarian and realized how evil the world was, that challenged my faith too, to be honest. Like, when I became a libertarian, it was almost a existential crisis for me and my faith. But now it's just like, I don't know, I'm just hyper aware of how broken and fallen the world is. And I guess my expectations are based around that. And so my faith isn't challenged when life, turns sour, because I guess I'm expecting that. But what sustains me through it is my faith, because truthfully, I don't know how people without faith get through tragedy, to be honest. And I don't mean that to sound judgmental, but just like, if you didn't have something like eternity to put your hope in, something like God to put your hope in, and you just had to look at the suffering in the world and just accept it, that like, well, this is just, life sucks and evil things happen and there's no purpose to it. I don't know how I could, I don't know how you could overcome that. So, sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but
no, it was a good one, man. I almost started crying. I kept my composure. Way to go. Good host. What about, so that's your faith, and that's great. What about spiritual practices? Are you doing anything different? Do you have like a spiritual, I don't know if ritual is the right word, but I don't know. Like, what is your spiritual life like? Your prayer, fasting? I'm guessing you don't say the rosary. We'll get you out one of these days. But,
I contemplated fasting. I didn't actually commit to a hard fast, although I did like a impartial sugar fast. Like, even like this, what I'm drinking right now, like, I've started getting these zero sugar sodas, because like, I wasn't able to give up my sweet tooth completely, but I've just started substituting it with diet sodas and sugar-free things wherever I can. So and I've been trying to, I always read the Bible. I've just continued that up, I listen to a lot of worship music, and a lot of hymns, actually. As I've grown older, I've this is one of the things that like I've started to lean a bit more traditional, but like I grew up in the contemporary evangelical world, but I've come to kind of detest contemporary worship, and I actually love the hymns and prefer I'd prefer my worship services to be nothing but hymns at this point. There's just something about when the things with my dad got really bad, I posted the lyrics to it as well on my Facebook. I mean, just there's something about the hymns that embody, the lyrics take on. It's like it would be probably heresy or at least heterodox to say that the hymns are almost another form of scripture. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes they're quoting scripture, but even when they're not, it's like there's something about the traditional hymns that just I don't know. Like my favorite hymn of all time is "Be Thou My Vision," and it's one of the oldest ones too, if I believe correctly, from what I've read. And I don't know, it just perfectly encapsulates and kind of like centers me on what my walk with Christ is. And there's just something about the words ring together in hymns truer and than they ring in most contemporary songs. And most contemporary songs is all about, it's building up the music and the singing and the beats in a way that like it's just like it provokes an emotional response or even a physical response because music can do that. But there's something,
in like 30 years, Chris Tomlin's entire discography is going to be in the Pew hymnal, and all the kids are going to think it's super boring. You know that, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
You and I were made to worship. Anyway, so Augustine said that he who sings prays twice. It was weird on my ears to hear you have qualms about saying that hymns are like secondary scripture, because in my upbringing, reading scripture would have been secondary to prayer and worship. Reading scripture, sure, it can be an act of worship, but it's not inherently an act of worship. It's not.
Well, I'm an autistic sola scriptura Calvinist. You'll have to forgive me.
That's fine.
No, but there's something, I don't know. Like I don't know. I go back and forth. I'm my own worst enemy, and I'm over analytical in my head. But see, like I believe in sola scriptura, but then at the same time, I will debate it in my head sometimes because I don't know. There is something to the argument. It doesn't get me the whole way there, but there's something to the argument that's like, well, you wouldn't have the scriptures without the church, or the church played a role in that. And even that, like, the apostles, they didn't have the New Testament. They just had the oral tradition. So I don't know. There's something there. Like, I don't even know if sola scriptura is an exact way to define my beliefs. I guess it's like the way I use it, and what I really want to stand on is that I don't want to be one of those Christians who cherry picks the Bible or goes, oh, well, this wasn't written by God, this was written by man. Like that, that is what I oppose. I don't know if I'm in as strong opposition to the idea that there is something to the Christian faith and tradition, like that is, I don't know, deeper or more, I don't want to say more important than scripture, but I guess it's just like maybe in a hierarchical sense, it's like something that comes before it. Like it's kind of like we talked about last episode, I think on my podcast, where it's like, does the Spirit come from God alone or from God and the Son? Like what's the exact order? You know what I mean?
I had just been reading about that day. So did we talk about this? I probably should have re-listened to our last conversation before we did this. But shout out to Tommy Salmons, by the way. He really liked that episode, which is great. And you've got a new listener, so that's good. And I'm glad that I was able to introduce him to your show, because he's got a great show. Now that you guys know each other, you should probably collaborate.
I didn't know he had a show. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, Tommy Sal. Oh yeah. He's got Year Zero. It's on the Libertarian Institute's kind of masthead. It's a great show. Actually, I just got to hang out with Tommy, and let's not talk too long about Tommy because he's already got a big enough head. But I got to hang out with him and his wife Beatrix at Thad Russell's Renegade University weekend down at Buck Johnson's place outside of Austin, and man, what a good dude. His show is so cool. It's just basically him talking to people, which is like any interview show, but like it's even more casual than, Blackbird or any other, interview show that you listen to. Like his dogs will come in the room and then he and the guests will just talk about the dogs for a little bit. His wife comes in because she needs a cigarette, that kind of thing. Like it's just like you're sitting in his house. It's one of the coolest podcasts in like the Liberty space. So definitely, if you don't listen to it, you should. And audience, same thing. Which reminds me, I owe him a message. I should probably get to him. Anyway, what were we talking? What do you make of all the? I was going to ask this, and I don't remember if we talked about it. What do you make of all the people converting to Orthodox Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, and that's very popular in the libertarian Christian circles. I remember when I kind of first joined the Christian libertarian and Christian anarchist social media, there was kind of like at the same time this great, like, I don't know, weird renaissance of like people like rediscovering the Orthodox faith. And I don't know. I mean, as much as I know about Orthodox Christianity, I mean, there's some overlap, I guess, in their, there's what's his name? I think Brooks Cavey is one of the big names in like the Christian Orthodox sphere, and
I've never even heard of him.
Yeah, you should. He did an interview with my counterpart Craig Hargis, who does the Bad Roman Project. They had a and Craig's a good friend, although we're like oil and vinegar. We're like completely different, but somehow friends. But we argue, and then like we have to take breaks from each other because like it's like we love each other but can't stand talking to each other at the same time. It's this it's a love-hate relationship.
All you need is a little mayonnaise to make a delicious salad dressing, and that was not a reference to anything other than salad dressing.
But yeah, I don't know what it is about the Orthodox faith that attracts people to it specifically. I don't know if it's they tend to. I think it's not so much anything about even probably the faith so much, or like the doctrines, as it is maybe the people and their approach to doctrine, because they sort of approach it with a humility and a gracefulness that I think attracts a lot of people. You know what I mean? And it kind of comes across as like getting reattached to your roots. And I don't mean to call out Catholics here, but it's like for people who find themselves at odds with the Catholic Church for whatever reason, but feel that call to reconnect with historical Christianity and the traditions to be found within it. Orthodoxy probably presents itself as a appealing option. What's weird is that there's like, I get that appeal, but I don't know. There's part of me, like my main hang up with Catholicism really at this point is just the Pope and the fact that there's no good Catholic churches around me. Other than that, like I really want to check it out and explore it more. And as far as my studying of history, I feel like I would have leaned more on the Catholic side than the Orthodox side when it came to that schism. But it's a complicated, messy history, so I won't get too much into that. But I don't know. There's something, and like part of this was like I just know a lot of really good Catholics, and I really love. Like I kind of started rediscovering Catholicism and like looking into it when we talked about this last time when I discovered Bishop Barron. And just there's something about, like, again, I feel that call to kind of like, I want to have that connection to historical Christianity that I don't really feel in my current kind of like evangelical circles. But I also, at the same time, it's like, I want that connection, but then I also autistically rebel against the some of the imposed traditions. So it's I don't know, but maybe that's why I don't know who was it that said. I think it was my friend Caleb that said like if you're when I said you're a self-loathing Catholic, and he said that's every Catholic. So maybe I'm just discovering that I was just born to be a Catholic or something. I don't know.
Aw, poor Caleb. Yeah, and I think probably Orthodoxy, what it brings to the table is, I hate citing Vin Armani because I do it so much, but is that like if we're entering an age of magic, then there is no more magical Christianity than Eastern Orthodoxy. They've always been that way in the East. It's they mix Orthodoxy with this just kind of crazy praxis with their iconography, and to them, I think, and I could be wrong about this. Like I don't really know much about Orthodoxy at all, but it feels to me like they really put worship before doctrine more than any other brand of Christianity. And if worship, that's a form of magic. So if that's what we're doing right now, if we're moving into sort of a post-enlightenment, post-reason, new age of mysticism, then Orthodoxy might be kind of where it's at for those of us in the sort of Christian milieu. And you mentioned Bishop Barron. I think part of the reason you probably like him is because he's an American Catholic, and American Catholics are all Protestants. It's just
oh gosh, there's just something about like, so I don't know. I still lean Calvinist in a lot of my beliefs, but my attitude is not Calvinist, because a lot of Calvinists profess beliefs in a way that's very kind of like I've had this conversation with Jose. Like a lot of evangelicals and Calvinists are very Gnostic in their belief structure, the way they conceive of their doctrines and stuff. They're like, this is the truth.
They have that in common with libertarians, by the way.
That's true. But I don't like, there's so little I'm willing to like, proclaim so strongly that I'll die on the hill for it. You know what I mean? Like, the only, like I like to say, the only hill I'll die on is Calvary. Like I literally, that's the only hill I'm not going to give up on, is like what Jesus did on the cross. Yeah. Like that is like, that's if you get rid of that, like what's Christianity anymore? So to me, that's at the core. That has to be preserved. Like the core gospel has to be, stood up for, and I'm not going to retreat on that. Everything else is just, I don't want to say it's gravy, but it's just, I'll have my beliefs, but I just can't approach them with this level of certainty or, I mean, judgment towards other Christians that a lot of my fellow evangelicals and Calvinists do. Whereas I don't know, there are definitely Catholics that have that attitude as well, but I've met a lot of Catholics, and I've met a lot of more, Orthodox leaning Christians who I have way more in common when it comes to like my temperament and outlook as far as like how I approach theology. Even if I come to different conclusions, I appreciate that for a lot of Catholics and Orthodox Christians, that theology is more of a journey towards greater mysteries that we'll never completely understand. And there's a joy in not completely understanding parts of the faith. Mm-hmm. Whereas some of the danger of the systematic theology, especially of like, Calvinism and other Protestant sects, I think, is that it's like, they kind of put God and religion in this box, and anything outside the box is bad. Yeah. We don't talk about it. If it's not in the box, we don't talk about it. We don't look at it. We don't acknowledge it. It doesn't exist. If you talked about it, then you're outside the box. You don't exist. You must be gone from our presence. And that's my problem, is that even if I agree, like I lean towards the Calvinist conception of salvation. Like that's the main thing. Like I'm more of a monergist. I believe in the idea of that, like salvation is something that God initiates, at least way more so than we do. That it has more to do with God's choice, and God, the Calvinist conception is that we are dead in our sin, and that dead men cannot revive themselves. And so God has to first, replace that heart of stone with a heart of flesh for us to be able to. And it's not that God forces us to choose him, but rather God revives us. And then from that state of regeneration, where we're actually able to see God and choose him, we of course choose him because only an idiot wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of my Calvinist framework of salvation, which rings true in my experience in my life, because it matches up with my experience of my faith, like I was talking about earlier. Like sometimes I feel like the more Catholic or traditional, maybe synergistic views of salvation are a bit more like faith is a bit more intellectual and a bit more conscious and chosen. Whereas with me, it's like my faith is like, I could actively try to abandon it and it would just, like double in size. It's like, it's not something I have any control. Like you asked me the first time we talked on your podcast, why do you believe in God? And I was like, I don't know. I just do. It's like asking me, why do I breathe? Or like, why do I like why do I like cornflakes and I hate Rice Krispies? It's like, I don't know. I just do. It's just who I am. It's a fundamental part of my being that I can't turn off. But at the same time, I don't know, at the same time, it's like, those are my beliefs, but I'm open to learning more and studying more and meditating and praying more. And maybe I'm wrong.
So I don't know what monergist means, but since you contrasted it with since you contrasted it with synergist, I kind of do now. Like monergist would be one initiator of the salvation, whereas synergist would be like a partnership.
Yes, exactly.
So is that why I'm trying to reconcile, I guess, monergism with, I think it's in 1 Timothy that God wills that all be saved and come to knowledge of the truth. Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned before that you almost lean universalist. Would that be a way to reconcile that verse?
That's the universalist argument. Yeah, that's actually the universalist. The universal reconciliatory argument is basically like monergism plus like 1 Timothy and other passages where it's like God is the one who does the saving. Jesus died on the cross for the sins of all, and wants all to be saved. Therefore, all are like, that's a very simplistic like summary of their argument, but that's basically the argument. And my position is that's kind of compelling, but I don't know. And I would never assume to know or like claim certainty in the idea that God has saved every man and woman. And but I'm definitely hopeful that that's a possibility. And as far as, if God wants all to be saved and not everyone is saved, there's a mystery there. And some Calvinists try to shy away from that. I don't shy away from that. But to me, it's the same mystery that exists on like, why does God allow evil? Why does God let certain things happen? Like we can kind of come up with, the answers we give aren't like explanations completely. They're sort of like, well, God's ways are higher than our ways. And we can't begin to imagine being in the position of God where, having that kind of control over people and outcomes. If he stopped every bad outcome, what would what I mean? It's kind of these hypothetical philosophical scenarios that people try to use to justify why God allows certain evil. Almost like they almost remind me of like trolley arguments sometimes, the way people try to explain why God allows evil. But truthfully, it's like, there's part of existence and part of reality and consciousness in our experience that's unexplainable. And I don't know, there's just part of me that like when I hit that wall, it's just, well, I don't have the perfect answer, but this makes more sense than a completely random, godless universe where, I'm a random compilation of stardust and atoms, but I care very deeply about morality, which to me seems like I don't know, that makes less sense to me.
To me, it feels like I mean, God allowing bad things to happen or whatever is kind of the weakest argument in my opinion. I mean,
I agree.
If that's why you don't believe in God, then you have a bad construction of what God is, and you're thinking what you're thinking is people who don't think like you are worshiping not God but their ideals and their pleasure and their comfort, and that's not what God is. I mean,
Yeah.
the picture is much bigger than Jacob Winograd's daughter, for instance. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe and you realized that in your car that night. That's
Well, think of the story of Joseph. Like, I mean, Joseph would not be in the position to do the great things he did if he hadn't suffered through all the horrible things that he suffered through. And that's just like that's the clearest example we have in scripture of like it's not like a textbook answer, and that's why the Bible is such a amazing book. It's why I believe it's the Word of God, because the stories in the Bible tell us truths and teach us lessons that you couldn't. And like, you know what I mean? Like, if someone asks me, why does God allow evil to happen? I can't give them an answer. I would tell them, read the story of Joseph. Like, your answer is in that story. I can't put it in words. You know what I mean? It's not a math equation, but the answer is there. You know what I mean? Like, why is jealousy bad? It can be hard to explain to a child why jealousy and being angry with your brother or sister is bad. Have them read the story of Cain and Abel. Suddenly, you start to realize, okay, that's why jealousy and coveting are bad. You know what I mean? It's like this is why Jordan Peterson was so, like, I think, such a phenomenon. Why he appealed to me specifically was because he helped to remind a lot of us who had become disconnected from our faith why the stories in the Bible are so valuable. And it's like they are God breathed, but they're not, like, the stories are not important because just they're God breathed. It's like they're God breathed, and that's why the stories are so magnificent and so impactful, and deeper than. I mean, I feel a lot of ways like Protestant Sunday school is to blame for this, because they taught these stories in such, like, boring, very autistic ways that, like, diminished them. You know what I mean? And so we had a whole generation that was kind of like they never got past being fed the milk. You know what I mean? Like, they never got the bread and they never got the meat. They only ever got the bread, and the bread's not satisfying after a while.
I learned more from VeggieTales than I did from Sunday school, to be honest.
That's the truth. Yeah.
So what about Irresistible Grace? That's a sticking point for me with Calvinism. Do you have like a quick and dirty defense of that?
Quick and dirty defense. If grace can be resisted, I guess the argument would be that there's a will stronger than God's.
Okay.
That's basically to summarize the answer. And that's basically the reason why monergists are monergists and they don't believe in synergism, because it's kind of like the whole premise is basically like, if the Calvinist conception of synergism is that you're putting humans in a position where their will is a rival to God's, and it comes into conflict with the idea of a sovereign God who has predestined all things to the counsel of his will. It's like, well, can God be thwarted? Is God sitting here hoping that humans do the right thing, like crossing his fingers, like, oh, I hope James and Jacob talk about this thing, because if they don't, I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board. It's like, and now I will say, like, so to me there is a reconciliation between free will and irresistible grace, and monergism and free will, which is something that a lot of Calvinists will give me shit for.
Yeah, but because there's a lot of, there's a lot of verses in the New Testament that, use literally the Greek word synergeo, like synergy. We do work together with God according to, I think it's like Mark, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, James, I mean, there's a lot of those verses, but I mean, I guess if I'm just putting myself in the head of a Calvinist and also not letting you talk, I guess I would just say like this working together is a post hoc thing. Like once the grace has been imparted, then you can become co-workers with the Creator. Is that right?
That is part of that. Was kind of like what I said earlier. Like God removes the wool from your eyes, and then you are free to choose. But like God had to act first to give you that ability. But I think it also goes deeper than that. There's this idea called Molinism. And I talked to Karen Ann about this a little bit on my podcast, but it's something that Calvinists reject and they reject it for that, what I talked about earlier. Like it's that box of sola scriptura. And like, if it's not in the box, then it can't be true. And it's like, okay, but like we do derive some ideas from scripture that aren't explicitly stated. Like the word Trinity isn't found in the Bible, for example. So to me, it's like, or I had Greg Baus on my show a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the idea of sphere sovereignty, which is a Calvinist idea. That's not found in the Bible explicitly, but it's a theory that's built upon the truths and scriptures from the Bible. And so to me, Molinism is kind of in that category as well, which is the idea that God has to summarize it, is that God has a middle knowledge and he knows all counterfactuals. So the way that he can orchestrate all things to the counsel of his will without coercively, deterministically making people do things contrary to their will.
Real quick, you've mentioned orchestrate all things to the counsel of his will. Is that a Bible verse?
It is. I can't remember at the top of my head.
Oh, it's fine. I wasn't sure if it was a scripture or like a Calvinist tradition or what. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to make sure because I'd never heard it before.
Right.
I'm sure it's one of those things that's really, really big in Calvinist circles though, because it certainly sounds Calvinist.
Yes. Well, and it is it's fair for this division to be there because there's a lot of verses that and passages that if you read them in isolation tend to lean Calvinism, and then there's ones that tend to lean the other direction. Things like 1 Timothy, like the passage you brought up, they're a little bit hard to reconcile with Calvinism, but then I think like the whole chapter Romans 9 is hard to reconcile with synergism. So it's, you know what I mean? Like in Romans 9, we get the whole thing of like, who are you, oh man, to question God? What shall the clay say to the potter? You know what I mean? Like, so there's different comment. I've read all the synergist refutations of that passage and why Calvinists are wrong. And, it's like, listen, this is my belief. This is not a hill I will die on. I could be completely wrong about this and I'm okay with it. It's just, it's just like, this is what I think makes the most sense based upon where I'm at in my theological journey.
From what I understand, you're in good company. I mean, the Augustinians and Thomists are much closer to Calvin than they are to, say, the Wesleyans.
Sure.
I mean, we're not so far apart, you and I. Well, I mean, you and I probably are, but you and I as like, for some reason, a representation of Catholicism in the libertarian sphere.
There's also the Anglicans and
I don't know. Do they have doctrines? I thought they just were a reactionary thing.
Maybe, I don't know, but they've from what I've read have kind of mixed a little bit of their post Catholicism, stuff with a little bit of Reformed theology. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's all interesting, and again, this is, to me, it's all an enjoyable part of like the journey of trying to understand more of the mystery. But we never completely get there. And odds are we'll probably get to heaven and we're all equally wrong and right at the same time. Like we all, I like the analogy of a diamond with many facets. Like we're all looking at a facet on the diamond and we can tend to be hyper-focused on what's right in front of us and not, or it's like looking at the moon and like we one side of the planet sees one part of the moon while the other sees the other part. And it's like, well, I only see this. It's like, well, I only see this. And it's like, okay, well, turns out you're both right. There's more than one side to it. And that's the way my mind works, at least.
Yeah. We see as in a mirror.
Yes. That's true. By the way, I looked it up because I just couldn't help myself. That passage I'm quoting is Ephesians 1:11. In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will.
There you go. All right, cool. I have one more question for you because we talked about hymns, and I wanted to ask this when we were talking about Heiss's wedding, and I couldn't wedge it in. Were there any cool songs, hymns, etc., sung at his wedding?
No, he didn't really play any Christian music during the wedding. He did play, and this is more of a nerd thing than a Christian thing. And like it was funny. So I don't know if you were into video games or not growing up.
Sure.
But like Heiss and I are big nerds, like into like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and stuff
that's
like
way
that.
nerdier than I got. Oh, but
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
No, but we're super nerds, and he had Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy music in his pre-wedding and reception music playlists, which was funny because like for everyone else, it's like, oh, this is a very nice ballad, very nice instrumental, and like me and Mike are just like, yeah, really nice when we were like 8 and playing on our PlayStation 2s and stuff, and yeah, and like my wife knew, like she'd see me get into a song and she'd be like, look, one song came on, she was like, oh, that's really beautiful. Where have I heard that before? And I was just like, definitely not when I've been playing Kingdom Hearts. She was like, damn it.
Lord. I have a feeling if Andrew and I ever get married, there will be some video game music played. Like Minecraft is just coming to mind, for instance. That's got the most beautiful music. Also, I don't know if you've played it. I'm not a gamer. I don't play games, but I watch. I love watching games. There's a game called Hollow Knight. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
It's a more modern, way more modern than what you just mentioned. Indie game.
I'm a boomer when it comes to video games. I'm like, if it's anything that I can't play on my PlayStation 2 or Xbox 360, I don't want it.
Well, Hollow Knight is kind of in the vein of like Metroid, where you're kind of like replaying the game over and over again as you get new achievements. But the artwork and the music in that game is just amazing. It is just the most beautiful game I've ever seen. So, if you're a gamer in the audience, go play Hollow Knight, I guess.
Yeah, some indie games have some really great music. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Undertale, but that has some of the
that's another one.
Some of the most amazing music.
I actually played Undertale. Andrew was sitting there guiding me the entire time. He took me down the pacifist route where I didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
So I got to see the nice little flowery ending. Apparently, there's the genocide route too, where you kill everybody.
The game was so fucked up,
and it's a little bit different. I love how that game was so cleverly designed, where like your saves aren't really saves.
Yeah.
Like they
part of the gameplay. Yeah,
it's really cool. That's a great game.
I know what you did.
I'm not quite as crazy about the music in that game. It's a little too 8-bit for me, but that's all right.
That's what I grew up with.
I'm allowed to have bad taste because everybody else loves Undertale's music. Okay, we're going long. Plug away. Do your thing.
Daniel 3, Biblical Anarchy. Pretty much everywhere you want to look. Twitter handle is @Biblical Anarchy. If you want to follow me on Twitter, the podcast is on YouTube. If you want the video form and you want to watch it live. Otherwise, if you want to just listen to the audio afterwards, pretty much, I don't know, everywhere that you can find a podcast, I've found myself to be on. If you just do a search, but Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts, like the big ones, obviously I'm on there.
Yeah. Have you been doing more live streams since the last time we talked?
I pretty much usually do, like every podcast now lately tends to be a live stream. Nice. I've done a couple shorts. Like I have two different things I'm doing now. I have my live streams, and that's like 80% of what I do. But then sometimes I just want to talk about something, and it doesn't warrant a full 2-hour episode. And so I'll do a pre-recorded like 30 to 45 minute monologue, and then that just gets recorded and published and released later. But I only do that, maybe once every couple weeks or so. Cool.
Yeah, and you did that call-in show I guess that was because you got stood up by a guest who we won't mention.
Yeah, I've been, it's like I have people that have submitted on the website that they want to come on and talk about some things. I just have to find a time to, because like the problem is like my schedule is very like I have to do shit late, like what we're doing now, and a lot of people don't have that ability. So
how does that work out for you? Do you you don't get like a lot of spam, or you don't really fit my brand or anything like that? People asking to be on the show?
not too much. I had one. Well, no, actually, having the website there and there's like a questionnaire you have to fill out, and that's weeded out actually. Because before I used to just go, "Hey, I'm doing a call-in show tomorrow. Everybody message me or whatever if you want to come on." Or what I did one time was I literally just posted the StreamYard join link, and that got some very autistic people in the lobby who wanted to talk about things that were like, we're not like someone wanted to come on and have a conversation about paganism and stuff. And I was just like, that's just not my thing. But
cool. Well, I use that booking website, but I keep it hidden because I don't want just like anybody and everybody to say, "Oh, I think I'd be a good fit for Blackbird." Because I'm kind of a slut when it comes to interviews, but I'm not that much of a slut.
Let me come on and advertise my healing elixir made of balsam oil and
that would be the best guess. No, I'm just kidding. Don't if you're selling snake oil, don't come on my show. But I might actually add a link to that somewhere. I'm thinking about. Man, we're talking way inside baseball right now. We got to go. I'm thinking about taking my website off of Substack and going back to WordPress because Substack lacks some of the features that I kind of want with, things like that where you've got, just custom pages and things like that. So, okay. I think that's it.
Cool.
Daniel318.com.
Yeah, it's true. The website is Daniel318.com. Some jackass got Daniel3.com before me. So
that's all right. All right. Cool. Well, I will talk to you soon, Jacob. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm sure this will be another hit, just like they all are.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. See ya. All right. Thanks, Jacob, for joining me today, and thanks to you, as always, for tuning in. Don't forget, blackbirdpodcast.com. Sign up with your email address so that you never miss an episode. And if you like what I do here, if you enjoy Blackbird and you'd like to get a little bit more of it, sign up with a credit card for $7 a month or $70 a year, and you will get full access to my complete unedited interviews, sometimes up to a month early. And with that, this is another episode of Blackbird in the can. Thanks again for joining me. Until the next one, live free.